Hello, my name is Dexter Jr., and I want to say thank you for joining me on today. Today I want to talk about the subject of identity. This simple 8-letter word has great significance in our everyday world. Often when I travel and I speak with audiences, one of the first things that I do is I call out a volunteer, one of the audience members, and I say, do me this favor, tell me who you are. And oftentimes they'll give me their name and they'll give me their profession. And I will follow up and ask them, well, let me ask you this. If you no longer had that profession, if you no longer work, would you fail to be? See, what this boils down to is that our identity is not limited to just our titles in our offices. Identity is deeper than that. Oftentimes our titles and our offices, they only serve as one subset of the population, a very small subset of the population. I'm a husband, but I'm only the husband of one wife. When I work with my clients, they know me as a business owner. But when I come home, my children know me as dad. The thing about identity is who we are, who we acknowledge ourselves as being. The Bible provides this simple truth that as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. What this means is what you know yourself to be, that is what you will demonstrate in your everyday world. That's the importance of identity. See, identity, we make our decisions from what we know and what we believe about ourselves. Now, identity is made up of three main components. It's made up of your DNA. That's the stuff that you get from your parents. Those are your genes, your traits. And there's some very unique genes and traits that you receive from your parents. It was necessary for you to receive them. If you didn't get those genes, those traits, you wouldn't be the person that you are today. The second component of identity is your environment. That's the geographical location that you came up in. There's certain attitudes and behaviors that are consistent in certain parts of the world that are not necessarily universally experienced in other areas of the world. Listen, I'm from the South and I like soda, but if you go up north, they like pop. Same substance, but we have a different name for it. And the last thing is that you have your experiences. Now, your experiences are the things that you go through in life. You go through certain things, you encounter certain issues, circumstances, and how you handle those things, they now become a part of the foundation for who you are. Essentially, you have developed a worldview based upon your experiences, and those things help you navigate the course of life. Now, using those three components, I want to provide this example. It might be kind of a cheesy example, but bear with me. Now, once again, I'm from the South. I like sweet tea. I like sweet barbecue, maybe honey flavored barbecue. And I remember I was visiting my family in the Midwest one summer. Now, I went to this restaurant and I asked for sweet tea and some barbecue. The waitress came out with a glass of tea and 2 packs of sugar. And I looked at her like, you must not know that you cannot make sweet tea with cold tea and 2 packs of sugar. Nevertheless, that was their version of sweet tea. And here's the kicker, their barbecue was vinegar based. Now, I left that place very disappointed in believing that people in the Midwest could not make barbecue. Couldn't be any further from the truth. The reality is that that's what they liked in that region. But my experience as being a Southerner just didn't mesh well with what they were doing in that part of the world. Another component, another thing that we must take into consideration as it relates to our identity is recognizing that a lot of the attitudes and behaviors that we have, we necessarily didn't always, for lack of a better word, formulate those opinions for ourselves. A lot of those opinions were actually given to us. Here's a prime example. A tool that I use when working with clients, and I'll be honest, this is a tool that I use for myself when I want to identify certain behaviors that I notice, is called a Genogram. Now, this is a psychology tool. Consider a family tree of sorts where you have your paternal side and your maternal side. What you do is that you list the people in your family. You list certain experiences that you know maybe your grandfather or your aunt or your uncle have gone through. You'll list certain attitudes and certain norms, maybe even some medical history. And what you do is that you start to trace how all of those behaviors and attitudes intersect with one another in your family. And lo and behold, you'll see how all of those things kind of make their way to you. And so what this does is it shows you that there's certain attitudes in your family that you'll notice exist within you, but you may not recall the time that you actually accepted it as your own truth. I know people who have addictive behaviors and who are abuse victims, and they kind of wallow in a shell. And this is the result of some things that have taken place in their family. They don't really know why they are the way they are, but oftentimes when we incorporate this tool into our sessions, there's always that aha moment, because now they can see, wow, this is where I got this from. And so I want to challenge you by saying that you can start to identify and ask yourself, hey, I feel this way towards this issue, but I don't know why I feel this way. And I don't think I want to feel this way. Just because you have an attitude towards something doesn't mean it's right, nor does it mean that you have to keep it. And so at the end of this video, I'm actually going to drop a link for the Genogram so you can do one for yourself. But ultimately, what this boils down to is that if you are desiring to become the best version of yourself, if you're desiring to really discover the greatness that exists within you, you're going to have to do an assessment of who you are as an individual. One of the things I always ask my clients is simply this: what does the person that you want to be look like? And oftentimes they say, hey, they're successful, they got a great relationship with their family. And I say, well, what is keeping you from doing those things? Are you doing those things right now? And sometimes I'll get excuses like, well, it's too difficult, and then I need this and I need that. But once again, if you see yourself as better, you're going to have to start doing better. Because as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. And so if there's an attitude or behavior that you hold on to that's keeping you from being great, I want to challenge you to challenge that behavior, because I would hate for you to be limited by an excuse that is keeping you from reaching the fullness of your potential. I want to say thank you for joining me on this day, and I hope that in the future we can work together. Thank you, and God bless. Greetings once again, everybody. Dexter Jr. So last time we got together, I talked about this amazing tool called the Genogram. Once again, this is an invaluable tool as it relates to the subject of identity. I use this tool quite often when I'm speaking with my clients to get a better feel of who they are, and also to help them maybe discover some things about themselves that they did not know. So today, I figured why not just put it on the board, kind of talk it through so you can do it at your own leisure in the comforts of your own home, and maybe start to ask yourself and get some answers to the questions that have always been pressing. So today we're going to talk about Mr. Joe Johnson. This is Joe Johnson right here. All right. Now, normally how Genogram works is that you identify your maternal side of your family as well as your paternal side of the family. So Joe's maternal side of the family is the Smith family. And then also up there you see Papa Johnson. That's his paternal side of the family. So what we have right here is we have Joe's maternal grandfather, which is represented by a square. We have his maternal grandmother, which is represented by a circle. So on a genogram, your sexes are represented by squares and circles. So squares are quite often used to represent the male. Circles are quite often used to represent the female. Also on his paternal side, you have his grandfather, and then you also have his grandmother. So let's talk about his maternal side, the Smith family. Now, this is grandfather Smith, grandmother Smith. Now, on the genogram, you'll have a legend, which will help you to identify what each symbol represents. On this particular genogram, the pink slash represents addiction. The orange dot represents being a victim of abuse. The straight line just represents a marriage. All right, so between these two, between the Smith family, they had 3 sons and 2 daughters. Joe Smith's mother, Joe Smith's aunt. Now, Joe Smith's uncle, first uncle, he actually had a divorce, which is represented by 3, by the dashes, by a purple dash. His second uncle is dealt with issues of addiction. The third uncle, nothing to report there. And then the aunt was a victim of, well, she suffered from addiction. His mother was an abuse victim. So let's tie that into the paternal side of the family. Now, on the paternal side of the family, you have the grandfather once again. Now, on this particular legend, I'm using red X's to represent deceased. So his grandfather is deceased. Grandmother's living. But between the grandmother and the grandfather, there was a divorce in their union. Now, you have the first uncle. The first uncle is deceased. You have Joe Smith's father dealing with issues of addiction. And then you have his aunt. She's pretty, no issues to report there. So what we have now is we have the parents. We have Joe Johnson's father. We have his mother. Now, as represented on this particular chart, we see that they are divorced. There was some abuse experienced by the mother. There were some addiction issues that were dealt with by the father. And all of this comes together to bring Joe Johnson into the scene. So why do I bring up all of these particular issues in the family? Well, what the genogram helps you to do is, one, it helps you to identify the issues that are actually existing within a family. Because whether you believe it or not, there are certain traits and characteristics that pass down from generation to generation. There are attitudes and behaviors associated with those addictions. And so you may find yourself having a particular belief concerning an issue. And as I stated previously, if you have not done anything to formulate that opinion for yourself, there's a very good chance that that opinion was given to you, or you just absorbed that opinion from those who preceded you. So let's talk about Joe Johnson. What we see is we see a pattern of divorce between his paternal grandparents, divorce with his own parents. There was also abuse experienced by his mother, abuse experienced by his grandmother. So what we're starting to see is we're starting to see themes and patterns that are existing from each generation to the next generation. And so the significance of that is that Joe may assume a certain attitude as it relates to relationships. Joe may say, well, look, when the going gets rough, when the going gets tough, there's no need for me to endure this relationship. So I'm going to get a divorce. Divorce may become a first option because all of his examples prior to that, that's the way they handled relationships. They got out of it. As a consequence, Joe may be given to being abusive because his mother experienced abuse in the relationship with his father. That's something that was modeled before him. And so whether he agreed with it or not, he saw that as a way to handle your issues. And as a consequence, he may now be given to the idea that, hey, you know what, if I get upset, I'll handle that through abuse. There's also a pattern of addiction, which means he may be given to addictive behaviors. And so we're talking about all of these attitudes that exist within a person, not because they came into an agreement with it for themselves. It's simply because it had been modeled before them in their early upbringing. And that's the importance of what we've been talking about. And so as we're talking about identity and becoming the person that you want to be, we have to start assessing the behaviors and attitudes that we carry. We got to ask ourselves, is this particular worldview that I hold on to as a truth, is it something that was given to me, or is it something that I came into for my own? Because if you want to be better, if you have a defeating attitude, I'm here to tell you that it's going to be hard to be better in that area until you first deal with the defeating attitude. And that's what we find in the case of Joe Johnson. Joe Johnson may be hard pressed to have a sustainable relationship. Joe Johnson may find it difficult to properly handle the issues of life because all of his examples were given to addiction, they were given to abuse, they were given to divorce. And so Joe would have to ask himself, okay, why is it that I always want to throw in the towel on a relationship? What in me is keeping me from fighting for this relationship? And so what Joe would have to do is start to put a system in place that would help him overcome the lack in that area. And so this is some of the stuff that I normally talk about with my clients as we're talking about becoming the person that you want to be. Ultimately, once again, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. So as you think and as you go about your day, your actions are a direct reflection of what you believe about yourself. It's not so much what you say, but it's what you do that is the representation of who you are. And so if we want to be great, if we want to be that greater person, let's start examining the attitudes that we carry on a day-to-day basis. Now, let me flip this around. I started with negative just to kind of help people get an understanding of some of the things that goes on in your everyday life. But let me also show something positive. So I'm going to use a this green marker. We're going to change the narrative for a couple of folks. We're going to get rid of these divorces and these abuse and addictions. All right. And this is really easy if you do it from the comfort of your own home, I promise. But I can assure you that it is quite enlightening what you'll learn about yourself and what you'll learn about your family. So in this instance, let's say that green represents wealth. So we'll say dollar sign, dollar sign, dollar sign, dollar sign. And we'll say dollar sign. All right, it's kind of rough, it's kind of dirty, but hey, you know where we're going with this. Okay, so in this particular example, the Smith family. Now, Grandfather Smith has his own business. He marries Grandmother Smith, and as a byproduct, all of the children come up in a household where wealth and principles of wealth are taught. Entrepreneurship is a very big thing. With the Johnson family, just a hardworking family, good family. Matter of fact, I'll throw this caveat in there. Let's say education. So my marker doesn't want to work with me right now, but it's okay. All right, let's try this again. All right, there we go. Much better. Percent sign. I don't know if I'm doing that in the right direction, but it's okay. All right. Now let's say on the Johnson family, education was huge. So we have an entrepreneur family. We have a family where education is huge in the family. And so think about the attitudes that will come and meet Joe in his life. Joe's father comes from a family that believes in education. His maternal side comes from a strong entrepreneurial bent. So imagine Joe's attitude concerning education and entrepreneurship. And so the genogram is not only meant to identify maybe negative behaviors, but it's also meant to help you identify good behaviors, because there's certain things in your family that are very good and that find themselves in you that you may just want to highlight and continue to build upon that. But ultimately, this is for you to say, being intentional about identifying and knowing the person that you are to help you in your process of becoming an even better version of the person that you want to be, or the person that you currently are. And so this is one of the tools as it relates to identity, because once again, identity is made up of your DNA, which is what we've been talking about. It's made up of your environment, and it's made up of your experiences. And so all of these things come together to form the person that you are. And if you want to become the person that you're called to be, there is some work that you have to put in. But this is a great foundation to help you on that journey, because once again, this is one of the main components that makes up you, the individual. So once again, Dexter Pagans Jr., hey, if you're looking for a coach, if you're looking for someone to help you in your process, I would love to be that person, because I truly and honestly believe that if you win, we all win as a society. So I want you to become the best person that you are called to be. And I want you to understand the fullness of the reality of living a life of purpose on purpose. Thank you.